The road into the valley lay quiet as a held breath, pale with dust and memory. Morning light stretched thin across the land, turning the grass silver and the distant hills blue as old bruises. A single wagon moved through it slowly, wheels complaining, horse steady, as if both understood this journey carried more than a body. Inside sat a woman with her hands folded in her lap, posture straight not from pride but from habit, the kind learned when the world teaches you not to take up too much space. She had learned early that hope must be carried carefully. Too much of it could break you. Too little could hollow you out. So she brought just enough, tucked beside her spare dresses and a bundle of letters tied with twine. One of those letters had brought her here. A man's handwriting, neat and distant, promising work, shelter, marriage in time. Nothing flowery, nothing cruel, just enough to sound safe. The ranch appeared without ceremony. Low buildings crouched against the wind, would weather the color of old bones. Fences leaned, but held. Smoke lifted from a chimney, like a sign that someone still believed in warmth. It was not what she had imagined when she pictured a wealthy rancher. There were no wide porches, no shining railings. Only honesty in the way the place stood, unashamed of its wear. A man waited near the corral. He did not straighten when he saw her, did not smile too quickly or stare too long. He wiped his hands on his trousers and stepped forward, boots worn thin at the soles. His hat shaded most of his face, but his eyes were steady, measuring not her beauty but her weight, as if wondering how much the road had taken from her. He introduced himself simply. No titles, no claims. Said he worked the land, kept things running. Said the owner was away more than present. His voice carried the flat calm of someone used to listening more than speaking. It was not the voice she expected, and something in her tightened, then loosened, like a knot testing whether it was safe to give way. He helped her down from the wagon, careful not to touch more than necessary. She noticed that. She noticed many things. The way his hands were rough but clean. The way he stepped aside to let her walk first. The way his eyes flicked to her trunk as if gauging its weight, then back to her face, as if correcting himself. Inside the house, the air smelled of wood smoke and coffee gone cold. It was modest, clean, lived in. A woman older than both of them nodded from a stove, eyes sharp as needles, seeing everything and saying nothing. She would become a quiet witness to many small truths, though none of them knew it yet. The room prepared for her was simple. A narrow bed, a wash basin, a window that looked out over land stretching farther than she had ever owned. She set her trunk at the foot of the bed and rested her hand on it, grounding herself. She had slept in worse places. She had slept in better ones too, before better places learned to turn their backs. That evening, they shared a meal without ceremony. Bread, beans, meat cooked tender but plain. Silence sat with them, not heavy, not awkward, just there. He spoke only when necessary, asked about the journey, about the horse, about whether she needed anything. He did not ask about her past, and that absence felt like a gift. He watched her closely, though, when he thought she did not notice. Watched how she thanked the older woman, how she ate without haste, as if each bite deserved respect. Watched how she offered to help clear the table without being asked. These were the things he had told himself mattered. Kindness, patience, willingness. He had convinced himself he was wise to test such things. Wealth had taught him too many people could pretend. She sensed the watching, but did not resent it. She had been measured before, always found lacking in ways no one could quite name. Too quiet, too plain, too much trouble to mend. Yet she did not bend herself into shapes this time. She moved as she was, steady, careful, offering what she had, and no more. Later, when the house settled into sleep, he sat alone by the dying fire. The lie sat with him then, clearer in the quiet. He told himself it was necessary, that he needed to know who would stay if there was nothing to gain. Still, something in her presence unsettled him, like a tune he could not forget once heard. In her room, she lay awake, listening to the land breathe. Wind through grass, wood shifting in its joints. She thought of the man who had once promised her a future and taken it back with averted eyes. She thought of the letter that had brought her here, careful and restrained, and of the man who did not quite match it. Not better, not worse, just different. And for the first time in a long while, she did not feel the need to guard her hope with both hands. Outside, the stars burned steady and indifferent, as they always had. The ranch slept. Two strangers lay under the same roof, each believing they understood the terms of this arrangement. Neither yet knew how deeply those terms would be rewritten, or how costly pretending could become when the heart begins to tell the truth. Morning settled into the ranch like a habit learned over years. Light slipped through cracks in the walls and laid itself gently across the floor, and with it came the quiet rhythm of work. She rose early, not because she was asked to, but because her body remembered the comfort of usefulness. Water was fetched. Bread was set to warm. The older woman nodded once in approval and said nothing more, which felt like trust. The man moved through the yard with the ease of someone who belonged to the land without owning it. He repaired a loose hinge, checked the fence line, spoke softly to the horses as if they carried his thoughts for him. When their paths crossed, there was always space left between them, a careful distance neither named. He thanked her when she handed him coffee. She answered with a small smile that did not ask for anything in return. Days stacked themselves quietly, each one similar enough to feel safe, different enough to feel alive. She learned the sounds of the place, which boards creaked underfoot, which birds nested near the well, which hours he preferred to work alone. In turn, he learned her silences, the way she paused before speaking, as if weighing the cost of words, the way she hummed while mending clothes, a low tune that carried no sadness, only endurance. He had intended to watch her for signs of disappointment, complaints about the house, questions about money, hints of regret. None came. Instead, she spoke of small things: the weather, the taste of the water, how the land felt kinder than towns, even when it was harsh. Each day his certainty about his test thinned, worn down by her steady presence. One afternoon, as they worked side by side in the garden, she spoke of her journey without being prompted. Not the details others might find curious, but the feeling of it. How the road can make you smaller if you let it. How she had learned to look forward without expecting too much. He listened with his hands in the dirt, feeling the weight of what she did not say. He had wanted a woman who would not be dazzled by wealth. He had not expected one who had already been stripped of illusion. The older woman watched them both from the doorway, eyes narrowing not in suspicion, but in knowing. She had seen men test the world and lose themselves in the process. She had seen women arrive carrying their whole lives in one bag and somehow make room for more. She said nothing, but she began to leave the room when the two of them sat together in the evenings, as if honoring a space neither knew how to claim. At night, when the lamps were lit and the work done, they shared the table again. Sometimes he spoke of the land, how it had been in drought years, how it could break a man if he tried to bend it instead of listening. She listened closely, asking careful questions, not to impress, but to understand. It unsettled him how easily she treated his words as worth hearing. The lie, once worn lightly, began to weigh on him. Each time she praised the simplicity of the place, he felt a twist of guilt. Each time she said she was grateful for steadiness more than comfort, he wondered what she would think if she knew how easily he could give her both. He told himself he would reveal the truth soon. After one more week, after one more sign, the markers kept shifting. One evening, a neighbor stopped by unannounced. His horse was fine bred, his coat too clean for honest labor. He spoke loudly, laughed easily, and nearly said too much. The man cut him off with a look sharp enough to bruise. The woman noticed. Not the words, but the tension. A shadow passed over her face, then smoothed away. She had learned when to step back from questions that carried teeth. Later, as the house quieted, she stood at the window, looking out at the land silvered by moonlight. She told him she had once believed love arrived all at once, loud and certain. Now she thought it came in smaller pieces, in safety, in being allowed to remain. He felt the words strike something deep and unguarded. He wanted, suddenly, to reach for her hand. He did not. Want, he was learning, did not grant permission. She went to bed believing she had found a place where she could rest without being judged. He sat alone long after, staring at the fire, knowing the test he had designed was no longer about her. It was about whether he would choose courage over control. Outside, the night held its breath, as if waiting for a truth that had not yet learned how to speak. The change came quietly, the way most truths do, without announcement or mercy. It slipped into the day, between the creak of a gate and the murmur of voices she was never meant to hear. She stood near the barn, hands dusted with grain, when the neighbor spoke again, careless and loud, praising land and cattle and figures that did not belong to a man who claimed to own nothing. The words did not land all at once. They gathered. They settled. They waited until she understood. She did not move. Shock did not take her breath. Anger did not rise. What came instead was a familiar stillness, the kind that follows disappointment you have already rehearsed. She thanked the neighbor politely when he noticed her presence and excused herself without hurry. Dignity, she had learned, was often the last thing left. From that moment, something in her shifted. Not her kindness, not her work, only the way she held herself near him. The space between them widened, not outward but inward. A quiet distance he could not cross without words. He noticed it the way a man notices weather changing in his bones. Meals grew quieter. Her eyes did not linger. Her humming stopped. He told himself she was tired, that the days had grown long. But the lie no longer protected him from his own knowing. Each time she thanked him for the simple life, he felt the truth burn against his tongue. Each time she spoke of gratitude, he heard accusation in the echo of his own silence. One evening, she did not come to the table. He found her outside, sitting on the step, watching the last light fall away. The land stretched before them, open and honest, offering no place to hide. He stood there, words pressing hard against his ribs, and realized there would never be a right moment, only a necessary one. He spoke then, slowly, without defense. He told her who he was, or at least who he had been before fear taught him to shrink. He told her about the land, the wealth, the choice to pretend. He did not frame it as wisdom. He did not call it protection. He called it what it was, a test born from mistrust. She listened without interruption. Her face did not harden. That, more than anger, frightened him. When he finished, the silence stretched, wide as the valley. At last, she spoke, her voice steady as a held line. She told him she understood the fear of being used. She had lived its other side. She told him how often she had been weighed, examined, found lacking by men who said they wanted a wife, but meant a mirror. She told him how tired she was of proving she deserved kindness. Her words did not wound. They revealed. She said she would have stayed if he had trusted her with the truth, even if it changed nothing, especially if it changed nothing. But she would not remain where her worth was something to be measured. Not again. That night, she packed her trunk. Not hurriedly, not in secret. The older woman watched from the doorway, eyes wet but unchallenging. She pressed a loaf of bread into her hands and squeezed once, hard, as if to say some things are not meant to be fixed, only survived. He offered to stop her, offered explanations, apologies, everything but what mattered most. He did not yet know how to ask without ownership. She left before dawn, the wagon rolling out as quietly as it had come. The land watched her go, unchanged and vast. Days followed, hollow and loud in their emptiness. The ranch felt larger without her, rooms echoing with absence. He worked harder, slept less, and understood too late that wealth had never been his burden. Control had been. He had believed love could be filtered, tested, proven safe. Instead, it had asked only for honesty, and he had failed it. At night, he sat by the fire and listened to the silence she had once filled with song. He thought of the way she spoke of small pieces of love, safety, permission. He understood now that he had been offered both and refused them out of fear. Far from the ranch, she made a life that did not ask her to bend. It was simpler than the one she left, but it belonged wholly to her. She carried the hurt with care, as she always had, but she did not let it turn bitter. Some losses, she believed, were lessons that only hurt could teach. Between them lay distance and truth, heavy and unmoving. Yet beneath it, something remained unfinished, like a story paused mid-breath. Neither knew whether it would ever be resumed, but both understood that pretending was no longer possible, and whatever came next would demand more courage than either had yet given. Winter arrived without asking permission. It stripped the land to its bones and left nothing hidden, not even regret. The ranch endured as it always had, but the man who worked it did not. Absence had changed him. He sold what he did not need, gave where he once guarded, and learned the quiet discipline of choosing less. Each act felt like an apology spoken to the earth, though he knew forgiveness was not something he could earn through gestures alone. When he went looking for her, he did not bring proof of change. No ledger, no promises shaped to persuade. He carried only himself, lighter than before, and the knowledge that love asked to be met without armor. He found her in a place smaller than the ranch, yet fuller in ways he had not understood. She stood steady in her work, hands sure, eyes calm. The sight of him did not soften her. It did not harden her either. It simply asked him to speak plainly. He told her he no longer wished to be chosen for what he could offer beyond himself. He told her he had learned too late that testing love was a way of denying it entry. He did not ask her to return. He asked only to stay nearby, if she would allow it, long enough to prove that truth could exist without control. She listened. The past had taught her caution, but it had also taught her to recognize sincerity when it stood unadorned. She told him she would not give him certainty. Not yet. She told him she would watch, as she always had, not to judge, but to understand. He accepted this with a nod that held no disappointment, only resolve. Time moved carefully around them. He worked where he was needed. He spoke when spoken to. He did not explain himself again. She noticed the difference not in grand acts, but in restraint. He left when the day ended. He returned when invited. He learned the shape of patience. Slowly, the space between them changed. Not closing, but softening. She found herself speaking without weighing each word. He found himself listening without rehearsing replies. One evening, as light faded and cold pressed close, she offered him a cup of tea. The gesture was small. It carried more trust than any vow. When she finally chose to walk beside him again, it was without ceremony. No declaration marked the moment. Only the shared understanding that they were both free to leave, and neither wished to. They returned to the ranch together, not as a correction of the past, but as a continuation shaped by truth. The place felt different, not richer, not grander, simply lived in. The older woman smiled and said nothing, as she always had. The land received them without judgment. Love, they learned, did not arrive with certainty. It arrived with choice, made and remade in small ways. On quiet nights, when the fire burned low and the world felt held, they spoke of what they had lost and what they had found. He never tested her again. She never offered herself as something to be proven. Between them grew a steadiness that did not ask to be named. If there is a lesson in this, it is not that wealth deceives or that love saves. It is that trust, once broken, can only be mended by humility, and that the heart recognizes honesty long before the mind learns to allow it. Some stories end with triumph. This one ends with two people choosing truth again and again, and finding in that choice a home that could not be bought, only earned.